Hello, I'm Scott Brady with Overland Journal and Expedition Portal, and we're going to go through the wrap-up of our 2021 GMC Sierra AT4. Now, there's a bunch of things that we have really come to love about this truck, and it's been through multiple configurations. We actually drove it for quite some time in stock condition, and then we changed out the tires and wheels. I wanted to get down to a 17-inch wheel, and that's something that's pretty notable about the Sierra, is that you can actually run a 17-inch wheel. So I've got AEV Crestones. They're a beadlock wheel, so you can run them in a standard configuration or as a proper beadlock. And originally I ran BF Goodrich all-terrain KOs. They were about a 33.5-inch diameter tire, and we ran it this way for a long time. But with time, we realized that there were things that we did want to change about the vehicle, things that didn't quite meet our needs. And one of those things is we wanted to, because we had a full-size truck, we wanted to take advantage of the fact that it was already a bigger vehicle and put a camper on the back of it. So we selected a Scout Kenai. Now this is a 6.5-foot bed model, and the Kenai is an 8-foot camper, so it hangs off the back a little bit, but even with the rear bumper. The camper does weigh it is a notable amount of weight. So it's about 1,100 pounds in the way that I configured it, which is the most minimalist Kenai that you can configure. They can get a lot heavier than that, but I did get it in at 1,100 pounds, and I've got about 1,500 pounds of payload with this truck. So because of that, that meant I couldn't do really any other modifications to the vehicle. But I drove it for months. In fact, I lived out of this truck and camper for months in the Kenai, and I just absolutely came to love it. But this is a half-ton truck, so that's what I found was the limitations, is just the limitations of a half-ton. But then I realized that there were some things that I wanted to do, the suspension. So the first thing that I installed was a set of Timbren heavy-duty jounces. These are they're near solid camper jounces. They sit right on the bump stop pad, and they provide a lot of support for a camper. But you have reduced articulation and reduced overall travel. So I decided that I didn't really care for that. So what I did was I installed a set of Hellwig Pro addle leaves. Now they go above the leaf packs. There's 2 leaves that are provided with it, and then it clamps onto the leaf packs. And it says it can provide up to about 1,000 pounds of additional payload. Of course, I didn't need that much, but this got me where the truck was back level again. And the ride quality was actually really impressive. And they use these elastomer jounces between the Pro Pack and the factory pack, and that prevents any of that spring slap that you would normally get out of that kind of configuration. So a really good overall ride quality with that. And then I switched out to the Timbren SES jounces. Now these are a progressive jounce, so I've gained back a lot of wheel travel in the rear, and it's also a much more comfortable jounce. So when it comes into full compression, it really decelerates the camper and the heavy weight of the vehicle when you're going through rough terrain. But then I also decided, let's try the truck in a little bit different configuration as well. So I removed the camper and I installed this Putco rack, and then went with a clamshell style roof tent. So I've gone with a couple different iCampers on the top. There's one that I did that was called a Sky Camp. Huge, roomy, it's like a king-size bed in there. And then most recently I've gone with this Voyager unit, which is their brand new unit that they have on the market. So this is a much lighter weight overall configuration. But I also recognize that my expectations for off-road capability are fairly high because I use my vehicle remotely all the time. It's important for me to get further away from the vans and the other campers that are so prevalent now in the backcountry, and for that you need capability. So I wanted to increase the ground clearance of the truck. I wanted to improve the suspension characteristics. The factory Ranchos are just adequate, but they don't work well once you add a bunch of weight. So I decided to install an Eibach suspension system. So this is a brand new coilover in the front with a heavier spring rate, and then it has new Eibach shocks in the rear. I went with 1.5 inches of lift more in the front over the 2 inches that come with the AT4. And then I went with a 2-inch block in the rear. The reason why I went with a 2-inch additional block is because I ordered Deaver springs, but they're so popular that there's a long backlog. So this truck will eventually have Devers in the rear, but it doesn't currently. So it still has the Timbren jounces, the Hellwig overloads, and then what's the equivalent of about a 3-inch block in the rear. That gave me quite a bit more clearance. It gave me that 1.5 to 2 inches of additional clearance, and the truck sits right when you have the camper installed. But more important than that, the vehicle handles much better with the Eibach. The suspension tuning, it's a firmer suspension overall, which works great because I tend to run with a little bit of a load. But then I also wanted to gain some additional clearance under the axle as well. One of the best ways to do that, in fact the only way to do that, is to change out to a larger diameter tire. So the tires I had on before were about a 33.5 by almost 12 inches wide. So I went with a 35 by 1050 Kenda Clever tire. And this is a fairly rare tire. It's difficult to find a 35 1050 17. In fact, this is the only one that I could find. And that gives me a lot more ground clearance under the axle, under the skid plates in the front. And I found that that made just enough difference that I could go more of the trails that I wanted to do. In fact, I even went across Hell's Revenge in Moab and a bunch of other trails. And I found that the truck and camper works great in that configuration. Okay, so let's go through the pros and cons of this AT4 project. So the things that I didn't care for about the truck, I would have really liked to have seen an extended cab model with the 6.5 foot bed. That would have given me a shorter wheelbase vehicle overall. And originally when the AT4 came out, it was available in that configuration. And I would even really love to see a regular cab with an 8 foot bed or a 6.5 foot bed that had the AT4 package as well, because that would give me an even shorter wheelbase overall vehicle. So I would have liked to have seen that. Hopefully they'll do that in the future. The other thing that I found was when I removed my rear tailgate, which people do all the time. They remove tailgates to put in campers like I did, or if you wanted to go with a different tailgate configuration, or if you had a fifth wheel or any number of things that you want to remove the tailgate for. All of the camera system disables. So I understand that I no longer have a camera in the tailgate because it's gone, but every other camera in the system stops working, and it actually goes to a black screen with a camera symbol and a cross out through it. So they need to fix that. It just needs to be like one camera is missing. I understand I don't get that angle, but everything else needs to work, because I lose forward facing camera, I lose the trail cameras on the side mirrors, and that's unfortunate. The other thing that I really don't care for is the G80 rear locker. They call it a locker, but I find that it doesn't meet my expectations on multiple levels for a four-wheel drive. So in order for the rear axle to lock, requires quite a bit of wheel spin, which pushes out these weights that locks the rear diff in. But because you have so much wheel spin, it does quite a bit of trail damage, and I don't want that to happen. The other thing that happens is when it locks in, because of all that wheel spin, the vehicle can actually slide off of your line. It can actually jerk the vehicle sideways one way or the other, or forward, which I don't care for. The other downside of it is that you don't get traction control. So in the front end, because the system requires wheel spin in order for the rear to lock in mechanically, I don't have any front traction control. So it turns off the traction control altogether when you're in four-wheel drive low range. So I only have the mechanical rear diff lock. I would much rather this vehicle had an advanced brake traction control system that had a trail mode that really did a lot of intervention when you had wheel spin, and then I would have it in the front and the rear axles. So the G80 in my mind is a negative for the AT4 platform in general, and they just don't work in the ways that I want them to work. All right, so let's go through the things that I do love about this truck. And there's a lot. It is a very comfortable vehicle to drive. I've never had a full-size before, and I'm really kind of smitten by the idea of these full-size trucks. They're so comfortable to do for long road trips. They're roomy. You can carry 4 or 5 people in them, no problem. It's just a really great road trip vehicle. I mean, it's got comfortable seats. air-conditioned seats, heated steering wheel, all of those things that make it such a comfortable cabin to be in, and then a lot of room for stuff as well because of that. But I would say that the thing I love most about this truck is it has the nicest motor I have ever had in any vehicle that I've ever owned. In fact, I would say that I love this engine more than any motor I've ever used on even a test vehicle. And that's because you combine the combination of diesel torque and performance with excellent fuel economy for a full-size truck. That pairing of the 3-liter turbo diesel and the 10-speed automatic results in 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, which is impressive given a half-ton with that kind of horsepower. But then it also can get, in this configuration that you see, 35-inch tall tires, roof rack, roof tent. I will get low 20s miles per gallon around town. And I can even get mid-20s on the highway as long as you're not going at high speeds. Then when I have the Scout camper fitted, I can still get 17, 18, 19 miles a gallon with a full-size camper. It isn't a pop top, it's a huge amount of frontal area. So it's really impressive how well this engine performs in this truck. I also really like the fact that we're seeing so much development from other manufacturers in the overland space. When all of this started, we had very few options. And now companies like GM, GMC, Chevrolet, they're coming out with products like this that meet the needs of overland travelers. We can get small displacement turbo diesel, high ground clearance, lots of aftermarket support, and then the durability of a full-size American-made truck platform. So overall, this has been a really fun project for us. I would say that we would like to do more full-size truck vehicles in the future. I just find that the half-ton didn't meet my needs for payload. So I would most likely not do another half-ton truck. I would move up to a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton.